Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast, with your industry veteran hosts, Michael Sandoval and Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Sandoval.
And I'm the other host, Chris Detzel.
The other host, Chris. I don't know why I started laughing when we start talking.
I thought I'd say something a little different this time.
Oh, well, always something new. Again, I always start talking about how we do a pre-show, and I always just think we should just record the damn pre-show.
I know.
As soon as we get on the phone, we should just okay, I'm just going to record.
Yeah, we could then just delete or add what we. Or
yeah.
What
now
we
just
want,
have the intro and then we'll and then we run it. So we were just talking a little bit about to summarize a little bit about our chat. We get into these little philosophical discussions about like how digital can be part of where does it sit, right? And I think one of the frustrations you were getting into, whether or not you want to kind of expand on them or not, is like accountability, right? And we've talked about well, first I should say that I think digital kind of vacillates, especially when a company is going through digital transformation and they kind of start to ramp. A lot of these things tend to be in one or two types. They're in IT and they start off as an IT project, or it's a company in which marketing is driving it because it's just seen as a marketing channel as opposed to an actual business model. And they kind of own some of it too, or it's shared or whatever, right? And it could be that, I think in some of your frustration you were expressing to me, that you were sensing that there was a lack of accountability for digital, right? And how I don't know whether or not this is your situation, but you kind of like, hey, I want to do some things on the website. How do I get this done? Oh, that's lower on the totem pole because we're trying to do this. Great. Okay, fine. I'll go find resource somewhere else. Go to IT. IT's like, well, the lights are on. I don't know what your problem is.
We're too busy. We can't help you.
We're too busy. And you're just like, where do you fall in that stuff? So I just was just kind of summarizing a little bit of what we were chit chatting, and I agree. And I fundamentally believe that the digital needs to be its own space, right? And we're just talking about one of our old colleagues who, whose company their company PPG is in that path where they're physically separating, or not only separating, just creating an actual C-level environment where it's going to get enough accountability all the way up to the C-suite, right? And that's almost like the natural progression of how a company goes. Now, for yours, which is interesting because you, at one point when you started off, you were in the support side of the house, correct?
No. So I reside in customer success. I've always resided.
Okay, I'm sorry,
for
customer success.
Couple of years, which that is sort of part of support, or support is part of the customer success. I'm part of the customer success management. So I guess the way I'll kind of start this off is it's interesting because a lot of times when you think of digital, or when I think of digital, I think of the digital assets. So you could have, like in our case, a community, a main website, a documentation portal, sites that customers go to log in to create a case, and to get different information there, and maybe some other stuff, right? So, in our organization, different people are accountable for those digital sites. So it doesn't all roll up into one. As a matter of fact, the three digital sites that our documentation portal, that's digital, our community, that's digital, and our main purpose site is digital. They all roll into different groups and different people. And so what I'm seeing is this, you know is that there's accountability, but it's all just depending on who you roll up to. So if I want to change something on my site,
well, that kind of makes sense.
I might or might not be able to get the resource to do like code changes, or even if it's CSS, I probably just have to hire a third party to help change some of that, because I'm not, I don't know that much CSS or any. I mean, I could Google it, but but really don't know that kind of stuff. So I do think that, when you look at companies like PPG or even Rexel, et cetera, to and I don't know if I've seen it at tech companies to where there's a chief digital officer or that kind of stuff. But I do believe that digital, in my mind, it would be so much easier if digital rolled up into like a digital kind of person. You know
Mm.
what I mean? That just owned it all and could have the vision, strategic vision for that. But that's not how it is in most tech organizations, anyways.
Do you ever see like the I hate to use the word popularity, but do you ever see the maybe it's the spotlight of community change over time at your company? Like sometimes everyone wants to talk to you, and then all of a sudden you're like trying to get people's time. Did you see that change over time?
It did change over time, actually, in a better way, because at first, and I think that's anything when you start from something from scratch and from zero, one is even if people believe it, they have full time jobs and they
Cautious.
don't want to help, right? But I've created such an atmosphere where I believe I have. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like it, that um, people are excited because
Yeah.
they get to do a
It's the Chris Getzer
webinar
party, man. Everybody wants to
and
join. Everyone wants to go.
yeah, and they're promoted in big
Really?
ways. They're bloggers. Like think about it. Like they're creating blogs, but I'm actually creating the blog for them. I'm
Mm,
taking it to a third party. They're
mm.
writing it. And I just get them to correct it, look at it, make sure everything's good. Oh, it's good. And so they're authoring blogs because of the work that I've done, and because of all the legwork that I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And so, but then they're more willing to help, right? So they'll do these really technical webinars,
Yep.
and then I'll promote them in a heavy way. I'll get on LinkedIn and say some stuff, or I'll let people know in Slack. I'll email their boss and their boss's boss and say thank you so much. And I'll copy my boss and boss boss, to make sure they're getting accolades because they deserve it, right? I mean, they're doing a full time job in addition to helping with community um, activities. And so now it's to a point, it's not perfect yet, right? But people are, for the most part, excited to be engaged in the community. Some of the issues are still not, all my questions are answered on the community. So that's a very positive thing. But it's not as fast as I would like, so, um, but at some point, I got to get customers to start really answering customer questions more
Well,
than
that's interesting. So, since you brought it up, I mean, how have you seen that switch, or is it just more of a I wouldn't say switch. That's the wrong term, but do you see that happening a little bit, or is it just more of a?
no, I do.
Oh, you do. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, good, good.
Yeah, I mean, customers are answering customer partners are answering customer questions and things like that. I would say the bulk of it, though, probably 70% today is customers are coming in to ask questions, partners are coming to ask questions, so that's good. Uh, but a lot of us are answering the questions. It is a support community, and I
Mm-hmm.
pride myself in answering questions as
That's right.
quickly
You
as
should. Yeah.
possible. And so, if another customer is not going to do it as of today, now that just tells me, for January on or next year, I need to build a plan to really think about how to get customers more engaged. So you know how it is. You got to build the foundation, and I think I've mentioned this before in other podcasts. Is
Yep.
that's what we're doing from a business technology standpoint, integration, et cetera, and content and things like that. Now I can start working on. Let's not call it a super user program, but something to that effect, right? Like, how do I get to a super user program? And so, building maybe Slack channels for a certain group of people that, will have access to different kinds of people, within our organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if they do these things, so really start building up, some of that. And I think that those, some of the rules could be something like, well, if you want to be in the Slack channel, or if you want to get, some uh, t-shirt or whatever the hell it is, um, you have to do these things, right? Like answer 10 questions a week, or I don't know, those kinds of things, and so be
So
this exclusive. Do what?
no, it's funny because it just reminds me of when we were talking about how do we attract people to our community. I think we were said, well, just let's give away some things, or just give them a T-shirt or something like that. And I started laughing. I said, you know what? That is true. We'll get a shitload of people just to get the free stuff, but whether or not we keep the good ones, the people who want to stay.
Well, I think swag is
I
kind
just
of a
carried the conversation. That's what made me laugh.
swag is a short term fix, but
It is a
people do
short-term
like
fix,
it.
but you will get a shitload of people coming to your site.
Yeah, they'll come to the site and they'll answer some questions. So I think there's some importance to swag probably, but it's not the key thing, right? Like, so how
Right,
do
right.
you create long term programs to continue to keep customers engaged? And so
It's a
this
blunt,
year,
it's a blunt tool, but it gets the job done.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so, like this year, I'm trying two AMAs. Ask me anything, and I'll do best job I possibly can to promote it, to get questions in beforehand. I have the right experts on there, right? And so we'll see how these go, and that would be
Yeah, I
kind of
actually
a
don't think there's anything wrong with AMAs. I think that's a. I mean, well, let me ask you a question. Are they? How do you promote them? Do you promote them?
yeah. Well, so our first one is on September 18th, right? So it's
Oh, so this is going to be your first one.
yeah for the AMA.
September
Yeah,
18th. Okay.
usually I do these more expertise things, but the way I'm going to promote it is, and I put this plan together. One is um, to our existing customer base. So I have that already in the community. So those people I will send questions to and rely on some of them, or I will ask them to send me questions. And then that will go out to probably 400 or 500 different people within the community on each one, depending on their product.
Hmm.
And then I'll ask our customer success manager team, so our tech touch team, to
Mm-hmm.
send an email to every customer that they can that's not part of the community, and let them know about that. So that'll probably be another 1,000 or two customers that will be sent to. I think only 40 or 50 will show up, but then what I'll do is um, I'll gather all those questions. I'll ask to log in on their behalf so they don't have to do it. I'll create a discussion thread, and then I will add that. I would add the questions that those customers asked under their name
Yep. Yep.
under that discussion thread. I will then send that thread over to the 3 or 4 experts that will be on there, and I'll say, "Hey, these are the questions that we're going to ask first," and I'll be the moderator. I'll be the one kind of talk, asking the questions, and you'll be answering. Then I hope people on the call will then start asking the even more questions, and so we'll see how it goes. I mean, um,
Do you have an
we're
example of others you've been looking at to see how to structure one?
I did like I looked at like this one company Genesis. They record all their AMAs and stuff like that, and they have a YouTube channel. Um,
Genesis, you say?
yeah, GENEYSIS. I don't remember, but they have a community
It's not
channel on
SIS, it's SYS or something like that.
SYS. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. This one dude does some cool stuff there. They even have their own YouTube channel and everything. Um, so I'll be doing that and see how it goes, and then iterate, and we'll have two. So if it doesn't do well in September, we'll do it on another type of product, or uh, I say product. So we have a data sec product, which is many products, and then we have an application security products,
Yep.
and so we'll just kind of cover the gamut of those two areas, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, if they're a hit, I'll do one every month. You know.
Yeah. Because as you were talking, um, like even from my industry, I think I said this last time on the podcast is, uh, one of the advantages about being a credit union is you can be very engaged with the community and maybe surface questions and or thoughts that folks have that don't know how to answer. There isn't a maybe like a record source record to say, hey, this is of truth, or this is how we would respond. Or banks tend to be a bit monolithic, right? Very kind of opposing, not opposing, imposing, I guess is the best way to say it. Kind of like, they only want to talk to people who have a lot of money, right? And in this community, it's definitely opposite. So in my head, what I'm thinking, right, like as you were talking was, since we don't necessarily have, and as part of the thing I've been thinking about, sorry to go back a little bit, even on the budget side, I've already started putting in this idea of what I call FAQs. You and I both know what that means, right? Uh,
Yeah.
starting the process of how do you take information coming in from the front line, and at least at a minimum, putting that out as SEO drivers, that kind of stuff, right? And then eventually kind of start talking in a more form like conversation point. I've already
That's exactly what I'm doing, by the way, on those AMAs. I'm taking that and we'll take those questions and add it to a page for in Q&A, you know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
say,
yeah. And it's great. The other thing I always think about too is that this is a bilingual uh,
"Hmm,
culture. So unlike what we were doing in other places where you can just really focus on English, this is truly where we're even down to forms. There has to be enough room for two languages, which again I find very fascinating. Uh, to go back a little bit,
that is fascinating to
man,
me.
it's very fascinating. So
I
everything
love to work in other languages, like even though I don't know it. I remember getting content out in French and German all the time, you know?
well, it definitely made the day interesting, right?
It
Uh,
did. I messed up in one big in some of the French stuff. I was like, I don't know if you remember it, but we're getting, we created some really great content in German, and so we want to do the same thing in France,
mm,
um, and although it was good content and it was about a specific product that they had, not Esabora, but maybe it was Domotique. It was a lighting type. I don't
oh
remember,
yeah,
but
yeah, Dometic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was the home. Yeah, yeah. That's it.
I forget. But anyways,
Home automation. It was a Dometic.
yeah, we got lots of content, and I got it translate, not just translate. I mean, we got it written in French and everything else, but it was so markety and fluffy, we couldn't use it for our support. I was like, shit. I mean, we probably spent
I do
like
remember that. That's true. It was
three or four grand or on the
and
content.
not selling it
So
bad. It wasn't substantive.
yeah, it was a learning experience for me, and it wasn't. It was. I mean, I think you were a little perturbed, but I mean, at the end of the day, we just moved on.
It's not perturbed. We have to go
Yeah,
through our journeys.
I was perturbed. I was like, oh, and I felt like I was like, he's not gonna let me like spend any more money on content, and so, but we still
There was
did.
some of that too, but I couldn't tell you just like, yeah, it's not going to work, man. But go ahead,
Yeah,
because who knows? And in some level, you have to kind of say you're not the one who's always the smartest person. Maybe this one will work.
I'm not always the smartest person, but we'll
No, I
see.
mean it that way, but I mean I'm not asking it for myself, but I think a lot of people in leadership positions they think they are the smartest person, right?
Yeah,
And then they think they like to hear themselves talk, and think as a result, because people listen because they're in a leadership position, they just think that everything they say is golden, right? And that's when you stop learning. But anyway, that's a total aside. But
it's a good point.
one of the fascinating things about the again going kind of rambling a bit, but it's going about languages is you and I've had uh, experience in doing all of this in other countries, right?
Yeah.
Well, and when I say all of this, I mean community and how do you engage a foreign. When I say foreign, non-American, and I'll say the word non-American speaking uh, uh, users onto their site, and every culture is completely different. Every culture is completely different, and it's
It
it's
really is.
amazing how, especially if you're working for a U.S. company, and if your company is based in another country, how incredibly, I would say the word, is it self-centered, biased, maybe is a
Uh,
word that we can become.
for sure, for sure. We experienced that.
And all the brands are in American English. I use those terms American English purposely in this regard. And then we translate them somewhere else, like when we're doing the grid, remember?
Yeah,
And it made for the power grid, which you get the kind of, and it's interconnected, and it supplies power to everything. So does the community, but yet we all have to contribute into it, or else it doesn't work. It had all these kind of uh, sub meanings to it.
yeah.
It made sense, right? But then when you go, I remember going to have our first discussion with France, and I was like, "What does this mean, the grid?"
They're
And the
like, what
word,
is the grid?
what is grid? Le grid? I
didn't
had a
didn't
kick
have
out
the
of it.
same meaning.
Yeah, and
So,
of course I try to explain to it in French, and they're like, "Uh, we don't have this in France, huh?"
but what's weird about that is the
They do, but
grid.
it's called different, right? It's not called a grid, right?
Yeah, what's funny about that whole story is, so by the way, the grid was our online community that we had in France and North America, and then we called it something else in Germany because they didn't like, and like you said, the grid called Elektrohelden, so
Yeah.
Electric Heroes. Um, there's only one. Interesting enough, there's only one community now that is there now. It's the French grid community. So if you go to the grid dot
FR or
the grid.fr or whatever it is.
yeah.
I forget the URL.
You have any
That's the
idea?
only
Yeah.
one standing. It's the only one available. The other two are gone. So,
Yeah.
and that was, and you know what it is? Mostly from Esabora. They're answering questions and things like that. So it was exactly what we said that needed it. A company that has the software, they're
Yep.
using it for that
Yep.
mostly. So
Although I will say this is
this
not
is a
not
side
to
note, but
not to disparage. No, no, it's a good one. So this is it's quite uh yeah, it's quite germane, right? Because we're talking about starting off the show around where does digital reside, accountability, and the way I said, oh, how is your community doing, Chris? And you said, oh, it's I feel it's in a better place, and I said, oh, it's like being at the Chris show, right? Kind of at the party, and we talk a lot about making sure that you have the right alignment at a senior level. One of the things I would say we all know this. It's not a learning. It's just when you do not have support from the highest levels, right? So when leadership really changed at our last company, and not to disparage, it's just he had his own personal view of what digital meant.
that's right.
It was definitely different from what the data clearly shows is how you run digital. Now, that's the best way I can say it. Um, and because going back to this, remember I said as a leader, you think you're the smartest person, blah blah blah. And I think and I would, and this is my own personal opinion, that he really truly thought that his view of digital and the way he kind of ran things was the right way. And so you have a lot of folks who said, "Okay, yes, boss, you're
Of
right,"
course.
even though I tell you the data is truly not the way it is. But hey, you're the boss, right? And it's a good example of where this is one of those casualties, right? There's said we don't need this, and kind of closed it. And it wasn't when you part of it was also uh, closing the food, right? In other words, you starved it. So it's a community is also you can kill it in a couple ways, but one of the major things is obviously just lack of participation.
Yeah.
Another one is lack of money. But if you do not give it any attention, which is the primary way it thrives, it will just die. And so that's kind of one of those things. You just could not get enough. You could not, and a leader, as our previous one of our mentors says, my biggest value as a leader is to give attention to things, right?
Yeah.
It kind of sounds egotistical in some way, but it actually is truth, right? So, as a leader, part of your value is choosing the right things to give your attention to. And in this case, is a really good example of if you move your attention away from it, it begins to die, right? And so, making sure you have the right I guess strategically you're putting your attention on the right things. And
Such a good point.
that's where that last company was, and I think it kind of rounds back to what we were starting off with the conversation is that accountability needs to always be in this when we're talking about community in that place needs to be present because it could potentially die. With all the great work, especially what you're putting in, Chris, to get stuff going.
Yeah. Yeah. Look,
Chris
I
party.
mean, this thing though is that it doesn't need to be a Chris party. I mean, you make it as interesting and fun as possible, but it has to be more of a. My job now is to, yes, I get some really good stuff going and all these things, but how do I kind of shift the minds to not just want to participate, but to invest in community from a people standpoint, from those kinds of things, and I think that that's my job to go do. And it's a tough one, but you know, but that's why, we are where we are. If it was
Yeah.
easy, everybody would do it, I guess.
Well, it's what keeps us. It's what keeps us all employed, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
So
Chris, I have no idea how we are able to fill our time. We always start off by saying, "What are we going to talk about?" I said, just record. We'll trust me. We'll find something to talk
figured
about.
it out.
I know. I love it. As always, Chris, I enjoy chit chatting with you, and I hope others, and I know others do too. So thank you, Chris, once again for another great episode of Peers Over Beers. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Zanable.
And I'm Chris Stetzel.
All right. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Thanks.